Grand Rising. Let's see if I can do this before the bus comes. It is July 5th. The end of the supermoon just left the sky. It's not the end. There's still 2 days of the energy, but I digress. What time is it? It is 6:55 in the morning, Pacific Northwest time. I think that's just Pacific time, but I digress. Welcome back to another episode of Barely Doing Stuff Now with Words. This last month, June was spicy. June was spicy. Spicy in a multitude of ways. Specifically the heat. Specifically the heat. I'm going to try to do this before the 19 gets here. I normally don't do these outside, and I have intentions on making this like a two-parter. So I'm going to try to talk until the bus gets here. And then when the bus gets here, I'm going to go to a different destination and kind of continue the talk. So I will have to rewatch this first part to try to keep a continuum. So hopefully it's not too long. But if not, I brought my blanket. So I got time today to make it happen. With that being said, this episode is going to be called Barely Pleasurable. And I think it's a very valid title for this particular episode, or at least for this string of thoughts that I have lined up as of right now. And I initially was going to write some stuff down, but when I checked out all the stuff that I had on me, I do have some stuff that I could be writing with. I did not choose to write with it. I also have this device, but it's hard for me to look back and forth with the notes and keep the camera going. Working on a multi-camera system. Yes, so Barely Pleasurable. Barely Doing Stuff Now with Words, episode 5? Because I think I skipped a month and didn't make extra episodes yet. So this is still episode 5. Which isn't the worst, but again, I've got to be mindful of the bus, so I'm going to be looking this direction a lot. Because it will stop in front of me, at least several of them will. And I will decide whether or not I can give my whole focus to the thought at hand. This episode's called Barely Pleasurable because the title seemed fitting for me, given the experiences I've been having this past month. Pardon the car, as I am sitting on a very heavy traffic area. I think more often than not, when the word pleasure comes to mind, we think about enjoyment. And I agree that there's much enjoyment in something, but that does not mean that things are mutually exclusive with the word pleasurable or the alignment of enjoying it. I'm being very mindful with my words, being very precise with my language, and I often am. More frequently than not, I choose precision. Not my best. So, no thank you. Or maybe someone else is good enough. When I'm choosing precision of language, when I am choosing how to navigate the safest aspects of myself, and choosing to reiterate that things don't necessarily have to be one or, like, let's choose between significance value. I'm stuttering right now because there's a certain level of anxiety that comes with me talking while outside. I'm really trying to gather my thoughts. I have most of this kind of keyed up in my head, and I just want to make sure that while I'm talking, I get to the best placement and alignment with how to deliver this information. So, for instance, when you think of pleasurable, you don't think of things that could be permissible or at least understood as undesirable traits in pleasure. So like people who work out, they gain pleasure from that. People who garden, they gain pleasure for that. Now this is all physical, but it's also mental as well. There's a certain level of dedication. There's a certain level of motivation. There's a certain level of controlled thought that goes into practicing physical and mentally laborious things. And in my experience coming up as a child, I didn't have the wherewithal to note the separation between enjoyment and pleasure. Because I can enjoy some things, but they could also not be pleasurable. For instance, spicy food. Spicy food is enjoyable to me. I understand now that spicy doesn't taste spicy. It is just activating my pain receptors, and I enjoy that. There's a whole line of BDSM things that you could get right into that would follow that narrative of my body does not enjoy this sensation, but I find it pleasurable. Like I don't know if anyone who actively engages in behaviors that would cause themselves self-harm enjoys the act of harming themselves, especially if you were to like take the power from them and then to harm them in the same way without their consent. I don't think they enjoy that, but I do think they find pleasure in the activity that they themselves engage in consensually. With that being said, I enjoy loving people. I find immense amounts of pleasure in loving people. Do I receive pleasurable responses in loving people? No, not always. The reciprocation level for humanity as a whole right now seems to be sold under the premise that there are things that are difficult to achieve based upon how we actually live our lives. So there's a great amount of value that I find in having the ability to be able to love people and being able to give love in a way that makes sense to me more frequently than not. And when I offer up that selection of love to those who are invested in receiving love in the most positive and healthy ways, that does not mean that they have the capabilities to do the exact same thing in return. More frequently than not, I have not been met with people who have the ability to be able to meet love at its no thank you but have a great day, who have not been able to meet me where I am currently in this particular mindset. What I'm looking for, what I long for as far as communication with people is truly authentic. It takes a great amount of vulnerability to be able to lead to a relationship with not only yourself, but with all those involved. And in my experience, I have not been able to find that. I have not been able to find that is the consistency that most people can show up as. Again, while you still may hold a narrative of peaceful and polite and kind and cordial, more people more frequently than not will see that as a weakness. I often say to people, because this is layered, everything is layered because we're sitting in a multiverse. I often say to people that I don't experience stress. I don't worry. And it's true. In my experience, in my noted experience, I don't worry. I used to worry a lot. I used to be like, oh no, what does this person think about me? How does this person feel about me? What do I do if this person doesn't like the choice of action that I'm making? What do I do if this makes someone else more uncomfortable? What do I do if in this scenario, this thing creates displeasure for somebody? And to get to the point where I am at now, you could call it bitter, you could call it jaded, you could call it guarded. I will take it as experience. I will take what I currently practice as experience. I think I have no more fucks left to give. Spell fucks Phuq. Z if you're feeling fuzzy. And so with the current display that I'm actively choosing to engage with that says, this is my characteristic, this is my personality, this is how I prefer to be seen. The world doesn't allot for what I would consider a lot of space to not be stressed. It almost seems intentional that you must be stressed. It almost seems intentional that you must be overcumbered with so many tasks that you can't focus on yourself, whether through our own choices, because there are a multitude of things that I would love to be able to engage with that I just don't have the space for more frequently than not. And when I say the space, I mean mental focus, mental aptitude to be able to continuously watch all of these things. Possibly with a team, I could manage more frequently than not. Possibly with a active system of people who could encourage and inspire with the same amount of hope and love and joy that I do. I have not found that yet. And more frequently than not, when I find those people, they are also overwhelmed or encumbered, or however you pronounce that word, with heavy amounts of stress. Recently, an ex-partner said something to me, and I asked them if it was a pointed statement or not, but they never answered back to me whether it was a pointed statement. They kind of avoided the question directly. They said, well, I don't live in a vacuum. And I had to look up what that meant. I didn't understand the idea or the practice of living in a vacuum. And it means so withdrawn from everything else. Essentially, I'm paraphrasing because I don't have the dictionary definition right in front of me. But I expressed that I don't live in a vacuum. I literally have to engage with other humans actively, regardless if I want to or not. My cell phone bill goes through an active service with other humans. The platform that I post this to is actively navigated, monitored, and dictated by other humans. My day-to-day interactions as far as the bus is concerned, obtaining food, my place of quote-unquote work is other humans. And I don't get to remove myself from those as I continue to make my community, as I continue to build and strive for community. And, you know, I actively live in this practice where it's like trees and forest and shrubbery zones, these spaces that exist, this ecosystem that exists, there isn't much worry there. And maybe because there's not a physical or permissible act of consciousness that we can perceive as humans, that we can see that there might not be worry there. But as I understand that community, of plants to be there is no active worry. When they need something, it is shared amongst themselves. Plants are my favorite. I love plants so much. Microbiomes and fungi could get even further into what I really love about the world. But they actively engage with the other parties in their system to say, I don't have it right now. I'm sorry that you need it. I don't actively have whatever this thing is. And when that comes about, they create a system to provide that thing. And I don't think enough humans actively engage with, I don't have that right now mentality, or I don't have concern for you having concern that I should have this thing, quotes and should. Because we're expected very frequently to behave in a manner that says, I have it all together. I have everything that I should have all together. I'm always okay. I am totally fine with however you respond to me. I'm strong enough to be able to withstand whatever attacks, whatever direct, insurmountable waves of energy you project at me, regardless of our agreement to be non-aggressive towards one another. And I think that's something we don't engage with in a healthy mental aptitude at all. Just several of the blankets. You can see me. I am born male, black. I'm 6'6". I weigh 400 pounds. There are some parameters that, because I look this way, that come with actively trying to engage with the world around me. I'm a threat to smaller people always. And if I'm not a threat, I'm a challenge, which means that I was a threat in their mind and it's something worth conquering. I'm a black person, which means I have to behave as far as a culture dictates that I should behave. There's a certain dynamic of engagement. There's a certain language. There's a certain decorum that I'm supposed to present as all the time. I'm male. There's a certain behavior that as a male person I'm supposed to behave as. And if I don't behave in that way, there's a certain level of respect and agreement that the world will lower me to or say that I am not doing, because there's behaviors that I'm supposed to engage in regardless of what I choose to do with my person. It's my person. I was given this person. God designed this thing. The universe thought this was the best variation of this to make so that I would fit into it. But because of the way the society is set up, the way that everything is actively engaged within the world, there's a lot that comes with that. And so when you talk about what it is to be in a stress-free environment, you have to not give a fuck about any of what this looks like or how you engage with the external based upon how this looks. How this thing presents to the world, because the sky isn't blue because there's blue pigmentation up there. The sky is blue is because it reflects every other color but the color blue. So if that's the narrative, then I guess I'm not 400 pounds. I'm every other thing except 400 pounds. I'm not black. I'm every other thing but black. I'm not male. I'm every other thing but male. But that's we're just talking about light language, and we're talking about how this body is a massive ball of energy based upon science, and none of this shit is actually solid matter. There's so many layers to how that could be deconstructed and encapsulated. But point being is that there's no stress currently, and this practice took a long time to get to. I actively don't give a fuck, as you can see, more frequently than not. There's a certain haircut I'm supposed to have. There's a certain dress that I'm supposed to wear that says that I'm actively engaging in societal standards. I really, at this point in time, I don't have it anymore. I don't have whatever anchors were tying me to the belief that I couldn't be myself any longer. Whether that shows up as queer, a label as non-binary, or any of the other platforms that the world could present to this physical display. Those interpretations are outside perspectives. They are outside of myself. The labels are outside of myself. People will say, and it's such a hard concept, because when I say people will say, when I say they, when I use the word they, when I use the word people, I'm alleviating myself of connection, because the I in me, the ego in me, is having this conversation with this recording right now. Even though I know none of this is separate, even though I have a clear understanding that this is all one universe, this is all one tangible consciousness, we're all practicing energy as one massive energy. There isn't like a separate massive energy. The earth is one energy, the solar system is one energy, the universe in itself is one energy. But to constantly be practicing from this isolated solitude, I, me, is a complex array of thoughts that are lined together. Not my best either. And then so when we're actively practicing to try to engage with the stress-free environment, you leave yourself open to scrutiny, because the rest of the world is constantly in a stressful state. The rest of the world is still actively practicing this is difficult. This requires a lot of attention from me. And if I don't give this attention, I will suffer in some way. And when we are allotted the space to no longer have that be the case, that someone else's suffering will increase suffering me. Now, I'm an empathetic person. I think I'm a sympathetic person. I believe other people's feelings I can relate to. I believe I've engaged with pain prior to this point in time. I don't believe that my active story has to be pain nonstop, constantly. And if I'm not in pain, then I'm the worst human ever because I actively eliminate pain from my life. Oh goodness, I've gone through so many stories prior to this point in time with the narrative and the practice that I need to be doing something to eliminate pain from my life. And it is the exact opposite. I didn't need to do anything. I didn't have to engage in anything. I didn't have to actively seek ownership over someone else's traumatic response. And because people aren't advocating for themselves in a way that says that there is love consistently in their behavior, there's a great proponent that says, because you can't see me the way that I see myself, you don't love me, which is wild to me, is wild. You, as this person viewing this camera, will never be able to see me as the universe sees me until you stop practicing the I, the me, the you separate conversation. Because when I love somebody, I tell them I love them with my whole heart. I tell someone I love them wholeheartedly. I engage with the behavior that this is us. And then fear comes about, and rejection isn't pleasurable. And someone protecting themselves isn't pleasurable. And the engagement with the practice of understanding that someone can only love me from where they love themselves isn't pleasurable. I don't have the understanding currently that loving somebody means accepting all of the behaviors that come out of their body without keeping myself safe. I have the understanding that the practice of loving someone fully with no conditions, like unconditional love, is loving them just as they are and then stepping back when they do something that is not pleasurable to me. It doesn't mean I worry. It doesn't mean that I worry that they're going to do it again. It doesn't mean that I worry that that behavior might be consistent. I allow people to show me what they are, who they are, and how they are. Just because I have a glass full of clear liquid does not mean I am drinking water. It could be alcohol. I would go down the list of other water-soluble, toxic things that could, and rubbing alcohol isn't the same as drinking alcohol, but it's clear, and there are several variations of clear alcohol. There are also several other variations of clear liquid that could be in a vassal of water, a cup that would allot for danger for me. But after the first taste, after the first engagement, if it caused me harm, it will do that consistently, regardless of how much, bless you, regardless of how much I actively engage with the fact that I don't have to do the thing that they're requesting based on the behavior. The behavior says, I need you to respond to me like this. And if you don't respond to me like this, you don't love me. Well, first of all, no. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do it at all. I don't enjoy that dynamic. I don't enjoy that engagement. That engagement does not allot for a specific type of care. That engagement does not allot for a clear understanding of self. I don't ask you to do anything so that I understand that you love me. I assume from the very beginning that you love me. I assume assumptions. It's an assumption, and I understand what the word assumption and assume do. I understand the little ask you me in there. Got it. But also at the same time, I assume that we are coming together under a mutual agreement for unconditional love. There is no condition to my love. There is condition for my presence. There is absolute condition for how long you get to be with me. Not how much love you get from me. I have never, ever, ever, ever stopped loving somebody. I don't know how. My mom is one of the most heinous people in my life right now. One of the most. Okay, in my interactions, you could love my mom. She could be a very delicious and delectable person for you. For me specifically, no, I don't like her. I don't enjoy her. But I love her. I don't want nothing bad to happen to her ever. I never wished harm. I mean, I was a teenager at some point in time and through heinous behaviors and activities before I got to this point. I definitely wish some heinous shit on her. I don't currently actively. I don't practice that any longer. I'm no longer in that state to practice that I need to be doing something to create disharmony for somebody else. I love unconditionally now. I accept you where you are, and I allot you space to do whatever that is. And if I don't enjoy it, if I don't engage with it, if it does not bring me pleasure, I actively stop engaging with it. I don't tell you not to do it. And I feel like people always think when I actively pull back, that is me saying, oh, I condemn this behavior. No, I'm very judgmental, and I'm actively practicing pure potentiality, which means not being judgmental, which means not holding space for judgment in my current display of understanding. That does not mean that I don't do that. I actively still engage with things to understand whether it's safe or not. Pulling back from something is one of those behaviors that is a judgment. I actively engage whether this thing will bring me a pleasure or if this thing will bring me a pain. And so whilst I do that, whilst I engage in that manner, whilst I actively practice pure potentiality and I allot things to be what they are, I also get to take care of myself. There's an immense amount of energy that goes into self-care that I don't think a lot of people practice because I have heard every excuse in the book. I've heard every excuse in the book. I've heard every reason in the book. Let's use a kinder word. I've heard every reason in the book. I have heard bullet points and active engagements that say, I have XYZ responsibilities and my life is not easy because XYZ. Fair. I have made some decisions in my life, and my life is now in the placement that it is right now. It is currently here. I am right present in it. I don't get to avoid any of the stuff that I am engaging in. It doesn't disappear when it stops being unpleasurable to me. It doesn't disappear when I stop worrying about it. It doesn't it's just, you just want to be in my mind, don't you? Just get out of there. It doesn't stop becoming something that I have no power over. It doesn't stop being something that I have no ability to control. What happens is my perception of it changes. My perception of the thing changes so that I'm no longer receiving any kind of displeasure from it. I no longer worry about the outcome of what this thing is, says, or is doing based upon how I feel about it. That's the thing that changes. That's my superpower. My superpower is I don't care. And if I do care, if I do care, when I actively practice care for something, that's not worry. I'm not worried about that thing. I'm not worried about that thing doing something that I won't enjoy. I actively say, all is well, always, even if I don't enjoy it. That's an active practice. That's a daily affirmation. That's a daily mental note. That's a daily mantra. I say that every day. All is well, always, even if I don't enjoy it. Everything's okay, says Catbug, who I love with my whole heart. Everything's perfectly fine. But society has taught you that it's not perfectly fine. The news has taught you that it's not perfectly fine. Your parents and other people, like if murder was about to happen to me right now, that's perfect. And I know I always get comments. I always get the weirdest comments. I always get the weirdest engagements with, so if somebody was trying to kill you, you wouldn't fight back? I didn't say that I wouldn't try to fight back. I just wouldn't be worried if I was going to die or not. So if you're not worried about dying, so why you fight back? I don't enjoy pain. I don't enjoy being stabbed or shot or anything I don't enjoy being punched. I don't enjoy that. I can actively engage in it, but I'm not worried if someone's about to do it. I'm not worried if someone has the intention on harming me or stealing from me or causing me any kind of disruption in my current practice. I'm not worried about it. I'm not trying to foresee the future and say, oh man, well if I gear myself up and do this thing, I could be prepared. No, I'm not. I'm actively doing one thing at a time. And right now I'm actively recording this video, and everything else that's getting my attention is taking away from the fact that I'm recording this video. This is where my sole attention is focused right here in this moment. And whether this moment exists for you and me as forever, or the internet goes out and this is lost to the fray, or maybe this camera cuts out and this is never recorded, that would be some shit. I've been talking for 31 minutes. It would be some shit. It could happen. It could happen. It could happen easily. There have been so many times where I have been recording and I have been giving it my all, and it just doesn't upload, doesn't save. And this is a digital device, and we live in year 2023, and everything's supposed to do things. Nope. So I used to do this thing where I used to tell things. I used to have this experience where I was like, okay, listen. This is what happened before, okay? And because this is what happened before, there's a chance that it might happen again. And because it might happen again, I should prepare for it. I haven't actively tried to move my face away from somebody trying to punch me in the face in years. Because I haven't thought that somebody's going to punch me in the face in years. Is it because I'm bigger than them? No. It's because more frequently than not, I don't do things that would beget getting punched in the face. Normally. But, I have a mouth on me, and I say words, and words will often trigger people and bring about getting punched in the face, sometimes with no prompting. There's no, sometimes lives come to an end abruptly. They just stop. No one was prepared for that. No one was worried about that during their normal daily ongoings. I'm sitting on the side of a really busy road right now, and a car could actively jump this curb and take me out. This building, which is slightly dilapidated, could have a fault right there, and that thing could just kill me. And you guys could get this recording sometime after it was recovered, but my head and face are just gone on camera. Boom! I don't worry about that. This is a bridge I'm sitting on. This bridge could collapse. I don't worry about that. My heart could stop. I'm a large, rotund person. I don't worry about that. We're actively engaged in World War III, starting with lots of Middle Eastern countries, lots of African countries, Ukraine and Russia, Asia's at it again, Korea specifically, China. We're actively engaged in a lot of strife right now. I don't worry about that. I don't see the point. I actively don't see the point in being frustrated and mad about everything. It doesn't do me any pleasure to be upset about my entire world. I am actively hopeful. I do actively practice a ridiculous amount of what I would call hope. This is so weird. Like every other bus except the bus I want to be on is coming here. No, thank you. I feel like it just jumped by me. So then every other thing that's been happening thus far has led me to believe in the practice of self. And self doesn't worry about self. The universe doesn't worry about planets exploding. The universe doesn't worry about life ending. The universe knows that life will return. The universe thinks every single speck is as important as the next life. Every piece of sand, every microorganism is as spectacular as the current practices, and we're the ones who have elevated ourselves to the point of I'm more important than everything else. I have a great amount of love and care, sincerely, for what I believe is a not very frequently practiced thought. That I am one with everything else, and everything else is one with me. And I say this from a really loving place, because while I engage with this thought, it does not remove the amount of discomfort that I experience while engaging in this thought. It is a very difficult thought to have and maintain whilst everyone else is saying, "You don't know me." No, that's why we have conversations. You're not me. Yes, I am a separate physical entity. Throw some quotes at physical. Energetically, we're the same. And the more loving and joyful we are, the closer to the same we can become. Again, I actively state when I am engaging in what I would call a very judgmental practice in my day-to-day ongoings. But it doesn't take away from the fact that whilst I feel like I'm judgmental, I am continuing to practice pure potentiality. I'm continuing to come from a place that says that this thing isn't harmful. This thing isn't negative. This thing isn't the worst. This thing isn't bad. This thing isn't good. It just is. And in those experiences of this just being what it is, you don't really get to see that it's not mutually exclusive for there to be pleasure and discomfort in the same place. That there is discomfort in love, that there is pain in love, but there's not stress if you don't allot for stress. My best understanding of love is that I hold space for you to be whatever you're going to be, regardless of whatever I am. And if those things mesh, that's great. If they don't mesh, that's great. My bus is here, and I got to listen to 40 minutes of this before I continue the rest of this conversation. We're having a different experience because it's not as sunny here, and it's not as loud. Let me see if I can wipe that free a little bit. This is my setup because I moved to a place where I could actually do a thing. There might be people passing by me back behind the fence, but for the most part, I am just in the garden. Let me put my glasses back on because I can't make out what's happening on the screen all that well right now. That didn't help because the glasses are horrible. Oh, and I have this plum seed in my mouth because I nurse them in my mouth until I plant them. Also, I have ice cream, so I'm going to be eating ice cream and chips. The last thing that I checked up on in the video was how I was defining love. And from what I understand, love to be is that we hold space for everybody to be themselves, whatever that may show up as. That space doesn't necessarily have to be in my proximity. And I think that's the part that agitates people. This is really divine, by the way. I think that's the part that agitates people to no end, is that they feel as though acceptance and unconditional love are the same as allotting that behavior in their presence, whomever may disagree with that. And I say this because the continued thought for me is people kill people all the time. It is a internalized methodology when we justify whether that murder is okay or not. I could take it into veganism and talk about the practice of animals. I could take it into pacifism and I talk about the active engagement of war or strife and violence. It's our personal perspectives that make killing okay. I don't necessarily enjoy killing. My food is normally growing out of the ground, and before I can consume it, I have to eat it either alive or I have to cook it while it is alive. So there's some stipulation to that, and people would express and say nuanced, but killing is still widely acceptable for a lot of people, but unpleasurable for most of people. And tying that back to what I was saying is we're holding space for those people to murder, regardless of what murder is, based upon your understanding and your interpretation of what life is, and what living is, and what vile is, and what would consistently make those unpleasurable experiences to witness or engage in. I say this because the talk is called Bearli, Pleasurable. That's what the entirety of this particular round of thoughts was about. Something not necessarily aligning with the standard consensus of what pleasure might be, and how that does not necessarily denote that there is no concern or care in that practice. There are tons of things like this. This talk is hard for me. This talk is difficult. This talk requires me to have a level of patience and consistency with myself that says that I will continue being earnest regardless of the discomfort that it brings about in my present vessel. And I say displeasure because, again, I'm still holding space for myself, but then I post this information publicly so that those who want to relate to me, those who want to engage with me in a way that is pleasurable to them, can do so. Because in the ways that I have engaged with people prior to this point in time, there's a certain level of demand that comes with engagements that is not pleasurable to me. I don't think anybody being demanded of is pleasurable, which is why I can understand where most people do not enjoy the engagements that they align themselves with. Due to my background, though, I have like very hardcore, I could volunteer every day for the rest of my life, find food, have food, eat food, maintain living, and comfortably do so. And that be everything that I do. Money would not be a factor. Housing would not be a factor. Water, warmth, none of that would be a factor. I could do all of that on my own accord because the universe provides. The universe provides everything, and it always has for me, and that's my experience. It's very specifically my experience. Now, I've got a background where there's children involved, but my children are with me. Now, had I had my children with me, my mindset would operate differently. I would have concern, not worry, concern for my children and their well-being, but not so much because the same way that I have the skills to find the basic needs as far as housing, food, and activity, I would be able to do the same for them, given their age and a lot of behaviors. And I think because we have been so, I wouldn't say catered, but we have been domesticated to the point where most of us just don't think comfort exists outside of what we have considered comfort based upon city life. And that's difficult. That's a difficult experience to kind of teach people away from, because I mean, I enjoy having a bed. I do. I've also slept on the ground and been perfectly fine. I enjoy having a TV. I do. I enjoy having this device that I'm currently using this with. I enjoy eating, what is this? Talenti dairy-free sorbetto. Roman raspberry. I enjoy that. It's enjoyable. It brings me pleasure to have what I have accessible to me. I'm also just very aware that whilst I have these things, not having them wouldn't decrease the amount of pleasure that I have in life, period. What I live as far as life is concerned, and how I engage with that life, how I consistently show up for myself, through myself, is a perspective. It is a chosen, active, practiced perspective. I am actively engaging with the thought that I enjoy living. And no, I didn't come from the place where that was where I always thought. I did not come from the place of, oh, my life is enjoyable. Oh, what's happening to me is enjoyable. No, I've experienced all of the abuses on the abuse chart outside of myself. And then I've probably done a good many of them to myself. So, from that perspective, thank you. Also, like, wow. You can just think about how we like to value things, and where do we associate and align our practices of pleasure. Because just as easily as I enjoy farming, just as easily as I enjoy sorbet, there are tons of people who don't enjoy those things. There are tons of people who do not find sitting on the grass, outside, talking to themselves in a corner of a field pleasurable. They not fun to them, and would gain a lot of disharmony from that. But that's not my goal. Is to express very clearly that I have done my best in my practices not to concern myself with what is pleasurable to them, which is why I'm working on community, which is why I'm working on the skills to help social navigate those things, but also being very clear with it's not a boundary as much as it's a standard, is that the base practice be love and compassion for oneself. And once we all kind of have that as an understanding, or at least practice that understanding consistently enough not to be detrimental towards one another, then there's a great, we can live. Like, if your practice of self-love and self-care puts pain and harm onto other people, then you're probably not going to be allotted into the space that I want to create, and that's perfectly fine. For every one side of a coin, there is an opposing side, and I accept that. That does not, again, it is not pleasurable for me to have the idea that there always must be a yin to my yang. But yin and yang also doesn't denote that one must contradict the other, or one must completely renounce the other. People always say stuff like water and oil don't mix, and then I look at vinaigrette and I go, what are you doing? How'd you get here? You shouldn't be, because you don't mix, even though you're delicious on my salad and I enjoy you, and you are definitely water and oil. So when it gets to the point of conceptualizing what it is to understand how a pleasurable experience can shape a person, it's a little confusing. It can be a little confusing, because a lot of people don't earnestly communicate their needs. And in my experience, this is not pleasurable. I mean, the sorbet is wonderful, but like, people not communicating their needs directly is not a pleasurable experience. Often enough, when I come across people, they don't know their needs. They have been living by the tail of the seat of their tail, or the tail of their seat. I don't know how that statement goes, but like, they have been living on stress forever. and they don't know how not to. They do not know how to not do that. So their preferred status is constantly doing stuff for people, with people, and kind of moving all the time because that's where their comfort comes from. And I just go, oh no. How do you ever get to pay attention to yourself if you're doing so much with everyone else? How do you get to really look at yourself carefully if your main perspective in everything that you do is based off of what someone else is doing? When do you get to have a moment of reprieve? Pardon me. If your whole entire engagement is it's not even being in service, because you're not in service to yourself if you're only focused on other people. That's a harm. Do I enjoy that for people? Nope. I can't tell people what to do and what not to do. I tried that. That does not work. People really don't like being told what to do. I myself am one of those people. You can't make me do nothing. You're gonna have to kill me, or torture me, or whatever the case may be. But I'd rather choose death than doing whatever uncomfortable thing I don't want to do. I'm going into 4 years strong now on some choices that I made and haven't had to step back down off of at all, and they don't seem as important now as they were made about, was it 4 years ago? They were very important. December 19th, November or December of 2019. They were very important decisions that had to be made, and if you didn't make them, you were a terrorist. And now it doesn't matter at all. And so, choosing to engage with what I want to engage with is I will deal with the stipulations that come with that. I will deal with whatever the outcome and turnabout will be. And I think a lot of people have not come to that conclusion. Like, I've got 10 dead children. I made those choices. They did not successfully come into this world. They did not get aborted. At least one was a choice that I didn't decide, but I still mourned because I didn't decide that. Someone took that choice from me. And then another, I have speculations that was done by family members because they were given a morning tea every day after it was found out that they were under the they were holding life. But that's one less child that has to live in the world that I live in right now. That's one less soul that has to engage with what I'm currently engaging with. But that's one more soul that tends to be with me, or at least entity that tends to be with me on occasion in my interpretation of understanding. Soul, energy, presence, being, whatever. I got to reiterate that experience, and that experience gets to shine through every so often when I am in need of company. And so they do. They make themselves very known and very present for my understanding. And again, understanding the practice of psychosis and all of the words that are based upon the European DSM, there are patterns of behavior that can be recognized when the behavior is inducing harm. I do not understand most of those terminologies on a more frequent basis, because then we would have to classify a great many people who fall into that sector who we do not classify into those sectors at all. We put zero weight to those people actively showing those behaviors and mechanisms. And so I would rather walk away from any European standard or title. Earlier I stated my blackness, my brownness, my manness. Those are all, again, titles from what I understand is European understanding, and they are pressed into my form. They are not a part of my form. They have been stamped there to denote that this is what I am in comparison to what I could be, or what I think I am, or what I feel I am. Um, we tell the butterfly it's beautiful, so the butterfly it's alive, and so I'm alive, and you're alive, and this interpretation of alive can actively always in the instant, and I really want to clarify this because I'm rounding it up right now because the last one was like 30 minutes long, so I want to kind of leave it at like 50, 60 minutes and not kind of go over that. If your experience is unpleasurable, you get to willingly stop. There is no moral compass. There is no right or wrong. You get to I was going to say more or less, end that life. That life does not have to continue in the way you have been taught that it is necessary to continue. You get to choose to disengage. And the learning curve or the learning process towards not having the understanding for what is currently the act of engagement is not as harsh as one might think it is. If that sounds a little around the bush, it was a little bit. Let me do it again. Having your life not be what everyone tells you it's supposed to be isn't the worst thing ever. Like just not living in the city, not having a job, not being with family, it's not as bad. I've got some desires that I would love to fulfill as far as community is concerned. I've got some desires as far as family is concerned that I would love to fulfill. I've got some desires as far as farming is concerned that I would love to fulfill. If I never fulfill those things, every day of my life has been a pleasurable experience that I never got to have before. And that's difficult for some people who have goals and are cemented into those goals. They have written those goals in stone, and if they don't fulfill those goals, if they don't fulfill that conquest, if they don't do this thing that was prescribed to them as far as like, I'm going to be, and then XYZ. I've died on a multitude of levels as far as like the interpretation of the presentation is concerned. And none of that has been pleasurable. But I enjoy everything that's present now. I enjoy all of what's present now. All of what's present now is what I interpret as love. And that may not always feel the way to you that you would want it to feel. You may not always perceive me as love. I will always do my very best to ensure that I get to love everybody from as clear a perspective as I can do so. It would benefit you to love yourself as much as you could do so, because there are far and few in between times where you get to simply love yourself as you are, and there are even fewer times where everyone around you will have the same expression of loving you as you are. But in my experience, if I can impart this with you as you round up the rest of this talk. This is also episode 6, not 5, because we're in the 7th month. So I'm one behind until I catch up. Maybe I can do another one this month and catch up for August. As far as that number counting thing goes, I'm right on time for whatever message I'm going to deliver. But I've noted that if you love yourself, people tend to want to love you You set the standard. You set the standard for what love looks like to you. And that's in how they talk to you. That's how they treat you. That's how they interpret you. That's how they interpret your actions. That's how they interpret who you are as a person. And if brashness is what you need to use for getting that need met, again, as long as you accept whatever outcome comes from that, as long as you can accept whatever the responses are from you choosing that narrative and that path, then you are welcome. It does not necessarily mean that the outcome will be pleasurable, but it will be enjoyable for you to create that space for yourself. I am currently choosing the route of kindness and love and compassion and grace. And again, the expectation of those around you are not something that you have to engage in. You do not have to engage in the expectation of, because I have accepted every negative behavior from every negative person in my life, you must now accept every negative behavior that I show you, because that's how I understand love. Well, that's not pleasurable to me. So I thank you very much for the offer, but I'm going to say no. I'm going to create a standard and a boundary that says that my pleasure exists within the confines of love and compassion. My confines currently, where I wall up, are a stress-free zone, because I do not worry. I love you, and I have compassion for your experiences, and I show you grace in your behavior this one time. But going forward in the future, I do not choose to engage. And that's the safest thing I can do for either one of us. Because you don't deserve to be treated any less than, and I don't deserve to be treated any less than. And so when we're engaging with one another, the goal for me is always to show you that you can be loved fully. And it doesn't have to be measured by what someone else thinks it should be measured by. It's whatever you think it is. So you get to choose that love, and your every interaction, every day, all day, that interaction is yours. You choose it. It's dope. And that's not always pleasurable. I am alone more frequently than not, physically. I am never lonely, though, because I have a multitude of presences that tend to show up with me, and they tend to make themselves very known, and I don't get to deny that anymore. Something happened with my understanding, so being alone isn't normally something that I understand any longer. But I still get to the point of wanting community, because while I have beings that exist near me, they don't exist in the way that I'm familiar with in the last umpteenth years of presence in this vessel. So with that being said, Barely Doing Stuff, episode 6. Oh, Barely Doing Stuff Now with Words. Episode 6 is coming to its conclusion. And with it coming to its conclusion, I want you to know that all is well, always, in always. Even if you don't enjoy it. And that can be difficult. That can be a difficult process to handle sometimes. But that's okay. Moving boulders is difficult. That's why you start with pebbles and then work your way up to rocks and then stones and then boulders. Again, all is well, always, always. Even if you don't enjoy it. And to clarify, it's always ALWAYS, comma, space ALL, space WAYS. Thank you for listening to my talk. I appreciate you. I love you. I I would love to spend time with people like this in person. I would love to have discussions that aren't arguments. I love having discussions. I don't enjoy pissing contests. The colloquial use for competition. I don't enjoy competition. I'm not competing with you. I'm the best me, and I want for you to be the best you. And if your best you has to compete, there are tons of people who want that. If your best you has to be angry and stressed and upset and sad to enjoy life, then I want that for you. I also want love and peace and serenity for everybody, but I don't get to define how that looks for you guys.